that. And I'd like to start. Welcome, Patricia Sullivan, author, Marblehead, to the League of Women Voters book group. So I have a little introduction that she was helped me with. First of all, she's known as Tricia. She's an almost lifelong Marbleheader. She went through our Marblehead public school system before heading off to pursue her physical therapy education. She's graduated from Northwestern for her master's degree, Boston University for a PhD, and the Mass General Institute of Health Professionals for her Doctor of Physical Therapy. Her clinical practice has been at Mass General, Kaiser Permanente in San Francisco, and establishing the faculty student physical therapy clinic at Boston University. In addition to being a faculty member at BU and the Mass General Hospital Institute, she's held appointments at Harvard Medical School, Curtin University in Perth, Australia, the National Taiwan University in Taipei, Marblehead University in Bangkok, and the Kathmandu University in Nepal. Earlier in her career, she wrote 4 textbooks on therapeutic exercise, which were widely used in the physical therapy community. Today, she will share with us highlights of her 30 years of international teaching, treating, and travel, which you can read about in her memoir, Boston, Bangkok, Bombay, and Beyond, The Journeys of a Physical Therapist. That's available on Amazon. I got mine from her. So thank you all for being here. And what we're thinking, she'll speak for half an hour, 45 minutes, and then at the end we'll have about 15 minutes for questions. So thank you. And Patricia, welcome.
Thank you very much, Kathy, and thank you for the League for hosting this, and to all of you for being here. This is an exciting experience for me. I gave one other presentation at the Council on Aging about a month ago, where we had about 70, 80 people there. It was very interesting, and it's great to do a Zoom presentation. So first, I'm going to share my screen and go through some slides. I tend to become a little verbose, so I hope that if I get a little bit too slow, someone will speed me along. But the activity started in 1988. At that point in time, I had left my faculty position teaching at Boston University. I was enrolled in a PhD program from Boston University. One morning of sitting in my kitchen having a cup of coffee, I received a letter of invitation to teach at Curtin University in Perth, Australia. The invitation was for a month of July 1989. So what do? I was going to finish my degree. I didn't have a job. What did I do? So that led me to 30 years of teaching, treating, and traveling throughout Australia, South Asia, Eastern Europe, and the Middle East. The first trip I took was 1989 to 1990. It was in 7 countries. The second trip, or the second portion of the book, is 1992 to 2015, where I went to many countries, many times. And then the third part of the book is in Nepal. And then the fourth part of this whole process was writing the book, which happened during the pandemic. So luckily for me, I didn't have much to do except for teaching my exercise classes and on Zoom during the pandemic. So I wrote a book. The first part of the book, and all the numbers refer to the chapters in the book. The first part of the book takes you through the first 10 months, the first 10-month trip around the world. The preparation was huge. We went through journeys, travel down in Marblehead, Village Plaza. I had finished my degree. I needed a summer to sail, And then Nancy and I took off for our 10-month trip. The first stop was in New Zealand. We needed a vacation after all of the almost year of preparation and had just an amazing time touring through New Zealand, mostly on the South Island. Then we went to Australia, which was our first teaching experience. We taught in Perth, which is where the invitation had come from, went up to Port Hedland, which was the exact opposite of Perth. It was hot, humid, unbelievably loaded with flies all over your face. Then went over to Adelaide to teach at South Australia Institute of Technology, went to Sydney for a vacation, and up to Brisbane to teach at Queensland University. So in amongst all of the teaching, we had a lot of fun enjoying the kangaroos, the wombats, koalas, and going through the forests, which were called bush, it was a new word for us, going into the bush, and seeing emus running through the bush, just an amazing experience. In Adelaide, we saw for the first time Aboriginal people really being honored. Their dancing movements were so similar to the animal movements we had seen when we were in the bush in Perth. And it was just great to see the Aboriginal people being so honored in what they were able to contribute to the Australian culture. From Australia, we went up for 3 months to Taiwan, where I had a faculty appointment at the university, National Taiwan University Hospital. There we taught intensively, taught a semester course on therapeutic exercise, which is one of the ways that physical therapy is provided. And the picture on the bottom are all the faculty with myself in the center and Nancy up in the top right. We worked with many patients. This is a picture of a hemiplegic patient on the bottom left and a fellow, a small boy up on the top right, who I played with in a physical therapy standpoint. He had cerebral palsy, and he used to teach me Mandarin by singing Old MacDonald to me. One of the things I wanted the students to learn was a decision-making process. They had been brought up in an educational system where they wanted to know the one right answer. And I wanted them to be able to go through a process to determine what was wrong with the patient and how they got that information. If this was what they determined the evaluation to be, then what treatment options were appropriate, why those were the best options, how that might be modified if the patient condition changes. You hope the patient's going to improve. And if they do, how are you going to modify their treatment? And what other options need to be considered depending on the age, family, home environment? I have to tell a funny story. One of the patients I was treating in the outpatient clinic was an older gentleman who had come and fractured his hip and was learning to walk again, a very common kind of problem. So I had taught him some exercises to do when he went home. His son was with him, which was typical. Usually the whole family came. So his son was there and learned the exercises with this older gentleman. When they came back 2 or 3 days later, I asked the man what he had been doing for his exercises and were they okay? And his son demonstrated. I said, well, now let's see your father do them. And he says, oh no, he can't do them. He's too old, so I do them for him, which wasn't exactly what I had in mind as far as helping the older man get stronger. But to continue on with the decision-making process, what possible options might be, and are the treatment goals that have been determined, are they consistent with the patient goals and what other options could be considered. I wanted them to respond with the pros and cons of each option. And again, that was not something that these Taiwan students were used to doing. So I had them work together in small groups so that they could report to the class. Whenever I asked an individual person to report, none of them wanted to. They kind of shyly put a hand in front of their face. But when they worked in groups, then they could report from the group. And it was a much more successful teaching learning experience. So I used this format in all my teaching. I had used it at Boston University. And then for the next 30 years, I used this kind of a decision-making process with students. We also had a lot of fun in Taiwan. Up on the top left is our Thanksgiving dinner. We had to go up to the English portion of Taipei to get a turkey, which was not common there. We cooked a Thanksgiving dinner for the therapists and doctors that we were associated with. We ate our mashed potatoes and turkey with gravy with chopsticks. Great experience. On the bottom right, you can see two people on a motorcycle. The woman in the back had had a stroke, and you can see her cane being strapped into the motorcycle. Everybody got around mostly with motorcycles at that point, and very few people wore helmets, as you can see us in the top right. After Australia and Taiwan, which were the paid portions of the trip, we continued on to Hong Kong and China, and we began the bargaining part of the trip. It was all done bartering. So we'll teach for you, treat patients, do whatever you need that we could provide, and you put us up and feed us. So it was just a win-win for both sides. After Hong Kong, we went up to Guilin, China, which was an amazing experience. It was right after the Tiananmen Square experience, and so there were almost no tourists up in China. I, as my usual, went into the market where I wasn't supposed to be, picked up one of the bamboo poles to see if I could walk with it, almost killed myself because the basket started to sway so much. I had to learn how to walk like a Chinese farmer. We also went into hospital and were just astounded that there was no, it was cold. You can see we have jackets on. There was no central heating. There was a small coal stove in the middle of the rooms. 8 patients to a room, all had their winter jackets and hats on. We went into what they call the physical therapy department, and we found out with our limited Mandarin that the people who were physical therapists had been conscripted off of the street, made nurses, and then because they needed physical therapists with the aging population, fractures, stroke, they took some nurses and made them physical therapists. So I worked with some of the physical therapists, technicians, and taught them how to stretch an arm rather than just crank it back. One of the beautiful experiences we had in China was going down the Lai River. It was just an amazing, beautiful place to be. But I was very upset, I guess is the right word, to see the communist flag off the back of the boat. It just was difficult. From China and Hong Kong, we went to Thailand. It's a very complex story about how we got into Thailand and started to teach there. But we taught in Bangkok, Khon Kaen, Chiang Mai. The school was right on the Chao Phraya River, and it was just like heaven. Teaching was interesting. The first day we taught there, we were led down into the auditorium by the dean of the medical school, who's behind me here on the left. And there was a formal introduction procession of all of the medical and physical therapy leadership into the auditorium. We had to give honor to the Buddha, to the king, and sing the national anthem before the whole class started. Not something that I was used to in my Boston University experiences. We also had a lot of fun there. We went down to the islands on the south of Thailand, and you can see the picture down here of the beautiful bay and palm trees. Went for tours through the canals in Bangkok and rode elephants. Just amazing. We then went from there to India, taught in Bombay. Up on the top left is Dr. Dastur, who was a physical therapist, who was our host there in Bombay. And down below her is Bella and her family. Bella was a student of Dastur and hosted us in New Delhi. An interesting part of writing the book is that I've been connecting with all of these people internationally and have connected with Varun, who is the boy here in the picture, who is now a neurologist in England, and the daughter, Vasudha, who has taken over her mother's physical therapy clinic back in New Delhi. And Agra was our reason for going to India. I wanted to see the Taj Mahal since I was 10 years old, and it was all that it was cracked up to be. It was just a phenomenal experience. We then went up to Nepal and was there during their revolution against the monarch. And we stayed, as you can see, in the Hotel Janak. And this is a huge protest march against the king. People in the streets yelling, "We want democracy," carrying communist flags, which seemed incongruous to me. But we finally were able to go on a trek. We got outside of Kathmandu into Pokhara and climbed up around the Annapurna region for almost 2 weeks. And as you can see here down in the bottom right, I was in the best shape of my life after 2 weeks of trekking in Nepal. We then came back to the Boston area. I became an associate professor at the MGH Institute, received a Harvard Medical School appointment, which greatly opened doors for me internationally. And then the numbers here are the continuation of the chapters in the book and the countries that we experienced during this portion of the trip, or of my international experiences. The International Scholars Program was a program I was very proud of at the MGH Institute. We had physical therapists from around the world come to us for their graduate education. And these pictures, 3 of these pictures are of the International Scholars Dinners that we hosted at our house. On the bottom right, you can see a number of Thai colleagues in the picture with us. And they were somewhat disappointed when we served lobster, in that the lobster taste was so delicate. So they took out their jar of chili flakes and poured the chili flakes on top of the lobster in order to make it palatable for them. Over on the bottom left, you can see a tall gentleman in the back, Ghazi, who was our tallest international student. He was from Bahrain, a very tall Arab guy. And one of the memory highlights I have of this whole experience was of this Arab gentleman putting a decoration on the top of our Christmas tree at home. None of these students had ever had a Christmas tree, especially a Muslim from Bahrain. During this next 20 years of my life, we traveled many times to Australia. We lived there for a year when Nancy was going to grad school at Curtin University. Daughter Catherine, and then 4 years old, went to preschool at the University of Western Australia, and I taught at Curtin University. And Chris Picard, who was the first person we met on our international trip, has been a friend for 35 years. Ghazi again is in the top right. He hosted me many times in Bahrain, where I taught at the university there and many of the hospitals. The gentlemen down on the bottom right are all IHP Institute graduates that I had dinner with one evening. At one of the workshops I taught in Bahrain, this gentleman, Neef, asked me if I would come to his home country of Saudi Arabia to teach. He had just been in the workshop in Bahrain. I asked him, will I be safe? He said, yes. I said, okay, how do we work it out? So I went to Saudi Arabia 5 times, teaching both at Riyadh and Jeddah, at many hospitals and at the King Saud University. And the bottom left, you can see knife in the back. It was quite challenging to teach because I usually get feedback from students and student faces. Are they getting what I'm saying? Is it somewhat similar to what they know as far as physical therapy? But many of the women had facial covering, so it was hard to read their face. And the men just sat there looking blankly. So it was hard for me to teach. I, at one point in time, at the end of the second or third day, asked them all to submit written questions. And that was the only way I was able to get feedback from them. Seeing them, the way they would do physical therapy on the bottom right, with clothing, fully clothed, etc. It's very hard to do physical therapy through 5 layers of clothing, but that's the way it was done. Each of the PT departments in the colleges had totally separate spaces for men and for women. So this gentleman on the top left was the head of the physical therapy department at King Fahd Rehab Hospital. And when he showed me around, you walked in the front door of the department, and to the right was the men's section and to the left was the women. So there were totally separate reception rooms, totally separate physical therapy departments. All the treatment tables were duplicated, mats, pulleys, weights, everything was duplicated because the men and the women had to stay totally separate. At one point in time, the male head of the physical therapy department asked me to go into the women's section and tell him what was happening there because he, as a man, couldn't go into the women's section. Again, very, very different from the way things are operated here. I taught on the right side, I taught and I helped teach from a clinical standpoint many patients. Diabetes and stroke are major, major problems in Saudi Arabia. And so teaching how to treat patients with hemiplegia was a major focus that they asked me to make. I had real difficulty in Saudi being a woman and having a wife. I was frequently asked what my husband did. Was it okay with him that I would go around the world? What did I have children? How did I leave my children? Who was taking care of them? The whole attitude there was very, very sexist and misogynistic. I could not go out of my hotel by myself. Whenever I went downstairs in the hotel to eat, I had to be fully dressed in my abaya. I couldn't go into the hotel gym because that was a male only. Uh, Everything was just very different from the way I was used to living in the United States. Also, another cultural challenge was my time here in China. So I went back to China when I was the coordinator of the Institute for International Healthcare Education at the MGH Institute. And on the top left, the faculty from Boston were invited to the second military hospital in China, and were up there as the introductions happened. Each one of us, we represented physical therapy, speech, nursing, acute nursing, ICU nursing, etc. Had small groups that we then toured the wards, the hospital wards, and did patient care, teaching the nurses how to provide physical therapy because there were no physical therapists at that point in time in all of China. So you can imagine we have 5 or 6 physical therapy schools in Massachusetts. In all of China, there was 0. They have an older population. They have a lot of stroke, a lot of diabetes, a lot of osteoporosis with hip fracture, and no physical therapy. So here I am on the bottom left, working with one of the rehab nurses, trying to teach her how to do physical therapy. And then I feel a tug on my sleeve from the woman on the right who said, me, treat me, me. She was going home the next day and hadn't yet been out of bed. Her side that was paralyzed was kept underneath the blankets. The side that was strong had an IV in it with vitamin C dripping to strengthen her body. She was going home having never been taught how to get out of bed, how to walk, how to do anything. So that was what I started to do with her. Again, just an amazing experience. I then went up to Beijing individually. I left the group. The rest of the group went back to Boston. I went up to Beijing and worked with a woman I had met when I was in Australia, who was the head of rehabilitation at Beijing Hospital, and worked with this fellow who had fallen out of construction scaffolding, broke his back, wanted to walk again, which he probably would never be able to do. He was paralyzed from the waist down, but that was the only thing he wanted to do, was stand and walk. There was nothing that we could use for that. So I got cardboard boxes, wrapped them around his leg, wrapped ace bandages around his legs, got him standing, but there was no way he was going to be able to progress much beyond that. There were no wheelchairs for him to use. He came into the PT department in a wheelchair that looked like the kind that Franklin Roosevelt used. There was just no equipment, no nothing for him. And he was married with 2 kids and no job. Thailand was a 30-year experience. For about 20 years, I went once or twice a year to teach in Thailand. And then for the last 5 years or so I was in Thailand, I was there for 3 months during January, February, March, which was pretty nice. A lot of what I did in Thailand was do work with another physical therapist doing home visits. On the top left, you can see me in one of the canoes that we use to get to people's homes. These other pictures are of me working with patients in their homes. On the right side, we show that there was no TheraBand in most of the places that I went, the elastic band. So what had been TheraBand in the very early days of that kind of elastic resistance were bicycle inner tubes. So where I was staying on the campus of Mahidol University, with a big bike shop, I went to the back, filtered through a lot of the old tires, the inner tubes of tires, brought them back, put them in my shower, washed them up. We cut them to the right right dimensions and gave those out as Therabin. So one of these women is a patient with back problem. Her sister wanted to join in the exercise, and Libba, who was also on this call, was at this experience with me. So as I mentioned, for 4 years, I was in the teak house when I was residents at Mahidol, which was just idyllic situation. We had many, many wonderful experiences. One was our own personal dressmaker. Nancy's being measured for outfits there. And then one of our dear, dear friends, Sopa, who again, we met on our first trip back in 1990, is here with my daughter, Catherine, at the Grand Palace and the Emerald Buddha, showing respect to the Buddha. The third section of the book is my experiences in Nepal. So there were 5 years where my life focused on Nepal. First, I was invited to work with the faculty to help improve their curriculum in the physical therapy department and to teach workshops. So Nancy and I, Nancy's in the large picture, Nancy's in the top center. I'm on the bottom right, and here's Nancy teaching some of the exercises and movements you might want to do with a patient that had low back pain. Catherine, who is now a junior in college, joined us for a trek through the mountains. And one thing that just struck me is the amount of stress that people put on their backs, knees, shoulders, etc. Can you imagine on the bottom right being in this position for 20, 30, 40 minutes, or even getting there, and then standing up and trying to do your job? In the center with the baskets, these boys were around 10 years old. The baskets were filled with cement. They were climbing up the stairs to the 3rd floor where construction was still being done. So that was the way they got the cement up to the construction. And so can you imagine what their backs would look like in about 10 or 15 years after lugging cement up? And so no wonder there was such a huge need for physical therapy. I became very connected with a village outside of Dulakal. On the top left, Min and his mother. Min was the host at the Dulakal hostel, the Kathmandu University hostel that I stayed at. And you can see him over on the right picture. He took me a number of times down to his village where I brought donations. So we had about 3 or 4 of these bags that you can see. And it had clothing, books, papers, pencils, etc. for the village children and parents. So for the 5 years, 10 trips I went to Nepal, I always took donations that came from the classes at the Council on Aging, my church, the Rotary Club. Just an amazing experience of sharing things from Marblehead over to this very, very poor village in Nepal. This is a picture on the left with some of the jackets that we brought to families there. And you can see a woman on the right that has the green jacket. That's Holly James's jacket, and it has all of these posters all over it, patches all over it. It was just so fun to see these Nepali elderly in our Marblehead jackets. On the right, these three children that were reading a book, again, given from a Marbleheader, about penguins. And when she gave it to me, she said, this was one of my children's favorite books, so make sure that it's given to special children in Nepal. So one of the things that was just so endearing to me is seeing these children in Nepal enjoying this book about penguins that this woman in Marblehead had just given. And then on the right here, this is the child that was in that threesome. And the next year when I went back, he came up to me and started to say A, B, C, D, and of what he had learned from the book that he had been reading that I had given him the trip before. On the top left is people in this village learning how to use a solar panel that was given by one of the members of Sustainable Marblehead. So they were now able to have light in their homes, pretty much shacks, for the first time. I treated many patients. This woman on the left pointed to her knee and said, fix me. She had this very, very swollen arthritic knee. That was not going to happen. This gentleman in the center, the boy, had fallen out of a tree, had been lying on the floor for 2 years, and was just totally paralyzed. It was just heartbreaking to see what no physical therapy treatment left people with. Then in 2015, the earthquake happened. So the village, the Dulacal village, had a school. You can see on the left side, they had a library, they had a classroom down below. The kids were learning, etc. Then the earthquake happened and everything was destroyed. At that point in time, I had become a member of the Marblehead Harbor Rotary. I met with the Dulacal Rotary in Nepal to discuss what could be done. They said to me, you're a physical therapist, you're a Rotarian, do something. On the bottom right is Dr. Ram, who was the university president and the hospital's medical director. You can see this is through the Wall Street Journal, giving a plea to the world for donations. The Marblehead Harbor Rotary donated a laptop, and these were some of the leaders in the physical therapy and the Rotary group. So I became a project manager, connecting the Rotary Club of Marblehead Harbor with the Rotary Club of Dulacal, Kathmandu University, which is where I taught, Dulacal Hospital, which is where the physical therapy department was. So I wrote and implemented a Rotary Foundation global grant, which supplied equipment to 6 of the hospital's rural clinics, and rural means way out. You could walk some of them for 3 days in order to get to one of the clinics. I developed Rehab Nepal, a foundation that I developed to support the staffing of the clinics. The Rotary Foundation, the Rotary grants don't pay salaries. So in order to pay the salaries of these 4 therapists that we hired, we had to have a separate foundation. These were some of the conditions we worked in. On the right, you can see one of the ways in which this gentleman had to get from one part of his living quarters to another. There was a newer house made for him, but there were no glass windows in the windows sections yet, because a tiger had been seen in the village And so he wouldn't stay there because the tiger could get into his house. So he went up this impossible ramp to get to where he was sleeping. On the bottom left, this gentleman with the crutches, he had broken his femur, his thigh bone, and there was no hospital, no nothing. He laid there until the bone healed, but it healed at a 45-degree angle. So he's trying to learn how to walk on crutches now that his bone had healed. And this gentleman in the center was in the service, had a bullet in his brain got infected, and he had just unbelievably coordinated movements. So I'm trying to teach the therapist there that we had hired how to work with him. Then we got back home. And back home, I said, so, and the pandemic started. So my last trip to Nepal was in the fall of 2019 in November. The pandemic started in February, March. And so I decided to write a book. And this was the cover of the book as we first envisioned it. Lisa Neville helped me with my website. You can see pictures across the top of some of my experiences in Nepal and some blogs on the right. Then as I'm writing it, I was able to work with Francie King, and this was some of her responses. So she was an editor. Again, I was used to having written 4 books and needing a lot of editing. I was used to getting a lot of read in return, but this was a little much. And then Mary Manning, who some of you know from the Council on Aging and from School Committee in Salem, was also a phenomenal editor. So after Francie, then came Mary Manning's edits, and then came Sarah Bennett's edits. And she was just phenomenal at designing the book, putting all the pictures in the book, which became an extremely complex process. And so then I saw this, that if you write what you sincerely think and feel and are interested in, you will interest other people. So I hope that is happening. So I thank you very much. And at this point in time, I will stop sharing and we could get back to our gallery. So I thank you, Kathy, and I thank you, League of Women Voters, and I thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Trish. It's really an amazing story of your life. And I'd like to open it up to, well, first of all, I have one question. Did you keep a logbook of everything you did through these periods of your life? I can't imagine recalling all these details and then writing it in a book. And then we'll open it up for other questions.
I did. I have very, very detailed logs. I never keep a journal at home, but while I was traveling, I kept a very, very specific journal, but I never looked at it when I was writing the book. And I think for me, once I write something down, it's in my brain. And so it just, as I was processing the whole thing and writing it sequentially, it just all came to me. So
very impressive.
The way my brain works.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. All right. I'd like to, I'll open it up for questions. You can either, I guess you better maybe use the raise your hand because we have like 20 people on this. So if you can do that.
Tom has raised his hand.
Okay, yeah, Tom, go ahead.
Well, yes, I love the talk, Trish. It's great. I wonder though, looking at all the continents and everything, did you ever get any invitations from South America?
Yeah. No, I didn't. We had one international scholar, a couple of international scholars, one from Argentina, one from Brazil, and one from Colombia. But I never got invited there.
Oh, that's a shame. That's a shame.
And we have a question from Linda Friedman. If you could give your website, that might be helpful for people to get more details if you have it handy.
Sure. And I also have some books for sale. As some of you know it, have read it. It's a great read, if I do say so myself. And I have some at the house. If you'd like to come by, I can sell it to you. I make more money if I sell it to you privately than if you go through Amazon, but you also can get it on Amazon.
So if you can either put the website in the chat, or actually if you publicly say it, that'd probably be helpful if people aren't easily in the chat. That would be good.
So I'll say it right now. It is P.E. Sullivan. So those are my initials, Patricia Eileen Sullivan, P.E. Sullivan, ptjourney.com.
Great. Thank you.
And it will go in the chat.
Okay, great. Questions from others? You can just raise your hand like this or do it with the icons
Nancy?
below. Oh, you're muted.
Yeah, she's trying.
Just wanted to unmute. Tricia, have you had a chance to speak to, to any PT students, like going back to your old stomping grounds, and share particularly the cultural differences, I'm sorry, that challenged your teaching style and also understanding of the cultures and the challenges they deal with from our perspective?
Interesting you say that, Nancy, because Tommy is here from Northeastern University. He's waving his hand now. And one of the things that I've been trying to do to publicize the book is to share with the different schools where I went to school or taught my story. So Tommy now is writing a presentation that will a story that will go on the Northeastern website. And he's connecting me with, well, you can tell your story, Tommy. He's connecting me with the person from Bombay. So tell that.
Yeah, so I'm connecting Patricia with one of my colleagues. Her name is Gina Reganini, and she hosts she's the liaison between all the colleges and the alumni relations department here at Northeastern. And essentially, she just helps put on talks for representatives of different colleges. And, after talking to Patricia, I thought she would be a great person to represent Bouvet at some sort of educational speaking engagement for the fall.
I totally agree. And again, Tricia, the book was wonderful, and I thoroughly enjoyed it, and will continue to enjoy the friendship and more stories to come. Thanks for including me on the invitation too.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just wanted to say, Trish, if you don't mind, I found it really remarkable. You're a highly credentialed, highly respected person in your, in your field, having written 4 books, and yet you stepped off the path. You stepped off the path to do something totally different, not knowing where it would lead. And I'm just really overwhelmed with that part of your story.
I had no idea where things were going to lead. And one of the things I learned about myself was my ability to take risks, like going to Australia after having received a letter that I didn't know the woman that sent it to me. I had never taught internationally. Nancy and I were brand new in our relationship. And so just go. I was just amazed at myself sometimes for what I did. Going to Saudi Arabia, where I knew things were going to be challenging, or taking the risk in Nepal to say yes to this huge project of getting physical therapy equipment out into the rural areas, treating patients in some of the most challenging situations and just going with it. It was just, I just amazed myself that I was doing it.
Other questions? Yes,
Leva?
Lipa.
This is not really a question, but I wanted to kind of answer one of the questions that someone asked, which was about the cultural differences that Tricia encountered. And I have to say that in reading the book, it was amazing. It was just incredible coming from an American standpoint and what we have here to hear about the kind of cultural differences that she managed to control and manipulate, if I might say that, so that she could do the work that she needed to do. And the stories are just incredible. It's a wonderful read. And I'm not a physical therapist, so some of the technical stuff I kind of skipped through, but the stories themselves are so rich, Tricia, and it's such a wonderful journey. I wonder if you could just tell people about, you talked a little bit about the woman that hadn't even gotten out of bed after she'd had a stroke.
Yeah.
Can you just say more about their approach to that and why that was true for her?
This was in China, in Shanghai. We, from the MGH Institute, 6 of us went over to Shanghai. We were invited by the nurses there through a nurse who was originally from China and was associated with the Institute. And the nurses at the hospital had no idea how to treat their patients who had had a stroke. And so we went over, we did a lot of planning and everything. We went over and we're just, I don't know if appalled is too strong a word, but appalled by the lack of knowledge that at least we used in the Boston area to treat patients that had had a stroke. As I mentioned, the patients were left in bed for a month to get stronger, to recover from the stroke. They did not have any exercise. At one point in time, I was in the men's ward. There were like 8 to 10 people in a ward. Worked with the fellow, sat him up on the edge of the bed. He got a little woozy, as people always do after they get up for the first time. We worked in sitting, did some exercises, got him back to bed. The next day, I went with my nurse group to the room and they said, well, we can't treat him today because the doctor said that was too much for him yesterday. So we went into the women's ward and these women were just lying there with nothing. So when I worked with the woman who tugged on my sleeve, I got her up. We got her into a wheelchair. The wheelchair had no brakes. The foot pedals just flopped down. They flopped on her leg, and I was concerned. So many people had diabetes. If it cracked her skin, we'd trouble. Got her out into the corridor to teach her how to walk. We had no cane, no shoes. There was no slippers, just walking barefoot down the corridor. Her son, she heard her son come. He said, come, teach me, teach him how to take care of me, and that was the way people were treated. And that were the doctors controlling it.
Wow.
Other questions or comments?
Questions, comments? Meryl, how are
Hey,
you? Good to
Beth.
see you. One of my good physical therapy friends from Florida, Meryl.
Yeah, so thank you for sending me this invitation, and I have the book, but I didn't get a chance to read it yet, Pat. But I just am so thrilled from the PT standpoint of what you've done, because throughout the years we always get invitations. I teach at the University of Miami, so we get invitations to come and speak, but not all of us always do it. And so I am thrilled that of what you did and where you went. And many of us go in, you know, I'm an old timer here. And so many of us go into this to not write medical record notes and electronic notes, but we go in to be creative. And to watch some of these pictures, I copy down the picture from the page number because I want to show my students when you talk about the cultural competence and what we have to prepare. You know, PTs are always trying to get patients ready to go home. That's the goal, and be functional and work or whatever their goals are. And this was just incredible to see how you used ingenuity and creative and improvised to just make it happen for whatever these patients needed to try to do to survive. So I'm just thrilled that you have this audience and that there's interest, and I'm just thrilled with everything you've done, and I'm just happy about it. Thanks so much, Pat.
Oh,
Great to
thank
see
you.
you.
Thank you. I'm just gonna need to move because I'm seeing that I'm almost out of battery. That one thing that I say in the book that it was really hits home for me is that I knew what to do from my experiences at Mass General, and I knew how to do it from my time working at the VNA. So at a visiting nurse association, you're totally in someone's home with no equipment, no nothing. And so I learned how to be resourceful by my VNA experience, and my Mass General experience taught me what to do. But a really important thing for me, and I think one of the reasons I was successful internationally, is that I really tried to never speak down to people. I was a I had 2 doctoral degrees for most of the time. I was I had a Harvard faculty appointment, but I was still walking through streams and rice fields in order to get to a patient's home. You know, so you can't take your degrees and whatever to be treating someone who has absolutely nothing. And that's something that was just so ingrained in me. I don't know why, but it made me very successful.
Trish, there's another lady, at 01945 is her,
Oh, yes.
has a
Elaine,
question.
how are you?
It's Eleanor. I'm
Hi,
sorry.
Eleanor. It's so good to see
Hi.
you.
I just can't imagine such an exciting period in your life, Tricia, knowing you for such a long time. And I'm thinking, with all of your trips and teaching and everything, do you hear from any or many of these people that you have taught and met?
Absolutely, Eleanor. Sopa, who was with Catherine at the Emerald Buddha, teaching Catherine how to honor the Buddha. We met in 1989, and I still communicate with her all the time. Chris Picard, who was the first person we met in Australia at our first visit, is a friend. She's been here a number of times. We've been back to Australia. We're very friendly with her kids and her grandchildren. As I mentioned, our colleagues in India, we connect with. I'm still connected with Nepal. And the little boy that I told you about who said his ABCs, he's now in 6th grade, and I'm in communication with him and the people in Nepal. The international students are colleagues of mine now. and many of them very good friends. Keshri, who was one of the international students, is the interim head of the physical therapy department in Boston, and Nasim, who was in the pictures, has just started a rehab unit out on 128. So they're all connected with me. So yes, I'm extremely fortunate to be connected with many, many of them.
That's great, Tricia. Thank you.
Mhm.
You did a great presentation.
Thank you, Ann. Any other comments? Hi, good to see you, Leon. Leon is a friend of ours from South Carolina, right?
Right.
Right. Good to see you, Leon,
Nice to see you, and thank you for the invitation.
by all means.
Dr. Sullivan, I have a question. Starting to pull it back, but when I worked as a chaplain in the hospital in Virginia for some time, and part of the cultural differences, because of some of the cultural differences, I wasn't supposed to touch a female, whatever the situation was. So you talked about the cultural differences, the sexism, if you will. Did you have problems with that as far from a physical therapy standpoint, touching a male or vice versa?
I didn't, because I'm kind of pushy and I do things like that. When I was in Saudi Arabia, or in Bahrain as well, when we have so when I teach so you have the morning from 9 to 12, half of the time is lecture, half of the time is laboratory practice. And so in both Bahrain and Saudi Arabia, when the laboratory practice started, the women were in one room, the men in another. And so I asked the gentlemen who were coordinating this, could I go into the men's room? And they thought for a while, asked a few people, oh, well, I guess you can. So into the men's room I went, and I started to put my hands on a guy to practice, demonstrate something. And he kind of flinched. He didn't know what to do. And I looked at my friend Naif, who I showed you, and he said, this is the first time a woman other than his mother and wife has touched him.
Wow.
And so that, then I kept going in all the time because that's who I am. But the men were just flabbergasted that I would do something like that.
Well, I didn't know that. I didn't know that you and Nancy weren't supposed to touch me. I'll keep that in mind next time.
So when we're treating you, Leon, when we come to visit, all right, we'll have to have your wife watching us.
It works particularly well at weddings, I've heard.
That's true.
You put your hands
When we're
on
dancing
strangers.
with Leon, exactly. Carol, you had a comment? Carol Davis?
Hi, Pat.
Hi there.
Gosh, it's good to see you. Meryl just told me about this this presentation. I didn't know anything about it. I have another Zoom coming, but I just was watching you, and I just wanted to say how exciting it is to see you. You look great. You look animated. What a wonderful career you've had. And
It has been.
And it reminds me of time together at Mass General with Miss Ayanta. Very common sense, pragmatic, down to earth. Listen to what the patient needs, and it's so great to see you thriving so beautifully, and to see the results of a whole lifetime of commitment to physical therapy and how you've used your advanced knowledge to bring about good around the world. So I just wanted to chime in to say congratulations on your book, and I look forward to reading it, and well done. It's nice.
Thank you, Carol.
Really nice to see you.
Thank you. Thank you. We saw, Carol and I have been known one another for probably 35, 40 years, but we got reconnected up at the University of Toronto. A gentleman invited Nancy and I one year, and then the next year Carol was also there. He is originally from the Philippines, and he hosted these lectures up at the University of Toronto as a fundraising for the physical therapists back in the Philippines. So Nancy and I were there one year, then again the next year, and we met Carol there, who was also lecturing. So it's good to
Right.
see you again, Carol.
Great.
So I think we need to be cutting this off. So thank you again, Kathy. Thank you to the League of Women Voters. It was a very, very interesting, exciting experience for me to share this with you all. Thank you.
Well,
Thank
thank you. Thank you very much, Trish. I think this is a great example of a woman making a difference and is stepping off the path that normally people would take and doing something wonderful. So thanks again for joining us for the Marblehead League Book Group as an author and also as a member of the League. And again, I did put the links to the League website and our Facebook page because we will post this recording there in case some people came in late and would like to see the whole thing. So thank you, everyone. And any people in the book group that want to stick around are welcome to do that. If you had some books that you wanted to talk about or share with the League, you can email me that list. So thank you, Trish, and welcome everyone. And thank you for attending this great program. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Kathy.
you.
Thanks, Trish.
Thank you.
Bye,
Great
Tricia.
presentation.
Thank you.
Well done.
Thank you.